Ancient societies crumbled in the blink of an eye, erased by a forgotten global catastrophe. This is the story of an event that nearly ended humanity and forced a complete restart. By the end of our journey, you will see the entire timeline of human history in a startling new light. We will uncover why giant creatures suddenly vanished from the earth, and if the lost city of Atlantis is more than just a myth. This single disaster forged the world we live in today. What does it truly mean for a civilization to be resilient? Deep within the ancient ice of Greenland, a researcher lifts a cylinder of frozen time. This ice core, with its countless layers, is a ledger of our planet's past, and one particular band tells a story of sudden, violent change. This is the geological signature of the Younger Dryas, a period beginning roughly 12,800 years ago when the world, which had been warming steadily, was shockingly thrown back into Ice Age conditions for over 1,000 years. The trigger for this climatic U-turn was a mystery for decades, until scientists like James Kennett began looking at a thin, dark layer in the Earth. They called it the Younger Dryas boundary, and it is a geological crime scene. Scattered within this layer, from California to Syria, are minuscule diamonds, tiny glass spheres, and unusually high concentrations of platinum. These are not materials commonly found on Earth's surface. They are the calling cards of an immense cosmic impact, either a comet striking the planet or a series of devastating airbursts that exploded in the sky. Picture a single, terrible day that left its chemical fingerprint across 4 continents. How does a single event achieve such global reach? The evidence suggests a hailstorm of fiery debris, raining down and igniting wildfires on a scale we can scarcely comprehend, instantly transforming the atmosphere and shattering the climate. That thriving mammoth steppe, a landscape of immense vitality, did not fade away. It was severed. The planet's fever broke in the worst way possible, with temperatures across the globe plunging by as much as 10 degrees Celsius within a handful of generations. Paleoclimatologists, acting as planetary detectives, read this story in the subtle chemistry of ancient ice. By analyzing the specific types of oxygen atoms locked in Greenland's ice cores, they can reconstruct temperature records with astonishing precision. These frozen archives reveal a climate switch being thrown, not a slow dial being turned. The cause of this deep freeze was a catastrophic breakdown of the planet's heating system, the Great Ocean Conveyor Belt known as the Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation. This current, which carries warm tropical waters northward, essentially stopped. With this vital flow severed, the northern hemisphere was plunged into a brutal chill. Glaciers that had been in retreat for centuries began to grind forward once more, reclaiming land and casting a long shadow of ice. For the humans and animals living through it, this was not a theoretical shift. It was an existential crisis. Lush pastures that supported giant herds simply vanished, replaced by barren, frozen ground. Food sources disappeared almost overnight. This was not a change that allowed for adaptation. It was a change that demanded a desperate, rapid response. Entire groups were forced into motion, fleeing the advancing cold in a frantic search for pockets of land that could still sustain life. This ancient climate reversal holds up a stark mirror to our own time. Our modern climate system, while different, operates on the same fundamental principles. It shows us how quickly stability can unravel and how deeply interconnected our world truly is. Against this backdrop of climatic chaos, the true struggle for survival was just beginning. A mammoth skeleton lies half unearthed from the frozen earth, its immense tusks a silent testament to a world that simply vanished. This was a planet of giants where woolly mammoths, saber-toothed cats, and towering ground sloths were not myths but neighbors. Their disappearance across the globe is one of history's most profound puzzles, and it happened in a geological heartbeat right around the time of the Younger Dryas. For decades, the leading theory pointed a finger at us. The overkill hypothesis suggested that as humans migrated into new continents, we hunted these great creatures to extinction. But this idea is now facing a serious challenge. How could small, scattered bands of hunters systematically eliminate dozens of massive species across two entire continents, from North America to South America, in what appears to be a single, violent stroke? These animals had already survived multiple ice ages. They were resilient. Their end was too fast, too complete to be the work of spears alone. The evidence for a sudden, violent end is buried in places like the La Brea tar pits in California. This site is not a slow accumulation of bones over centuries. It is a snapshot of a single, terrible moment. A diverse collection of animals, from predators to prey, were trapped and preserved together. This suggests a catastrophic event that overwhelmed entire ecosystems at once, not a slow, patient hunt. The extinction pattern fits what scientists call a blitzkrieg model, a rapid collapse. It is inconsistent with the gradual spread of human hunters, who would have taken generations to move across such vast landscapes. Instead, the timeline aligns perfectly with the cosmic impact and the climate chaos that followed. Imagine the chain of events. First, the fiery airbursts ignite continent-spanning wildfires, destroying the food sources and habitats these giants depended on. Then, the immediate and drastic climate shift turns their world into a frozen wasteland. The mammoths did not slowly starve over millennia. Their world was taken from them in a season. The fate of these magnificent creatures is a tragic but crucial piece of the puzzle. It shows us that the catastrophe was not just a change in the weather. It was an ecological reset that reshaped life on Earth itself. The sky above North America would have fractured with a light brighter than 1,000 suns. A fragmented comet hurtling from deep space did not so much strike the planet as detonate upon it, unleashing energy equivalent to millions of modern nuclear weapons in a series of devastating airbursts. This is the core of the impact hypothesis, a bold idea championed by scientists like Richard Firestone and Alan West that connects a cosmic event directly to the earthbound chaos of the Younger Dryas. The evidence for this cataclysm is written in a strange, dark layer of Earth that archaeologists call the black mat. This carbon-rich deposit, found blanketing ancient soil layers at sites across North and South America, marks a stark dividing line in time. Below it, you find the tools and hearths of the Clovis people, some of the earliest known inhabitants of the continent. Above it, those vibrant cultures are simply gone. The black mat itself is not just ash, it is a global soot stain, the charred remains of continent-spanning wildfires ignited by the intense thermal pulse of the impact. Scattered within this dark layer are tiny, hardened spheres of glass, known as impact spherules. These microscopic beads are formed when rock is instantly vaporized by immense heat and pressure, then condenses as it falls back through the atmosphere. Finding them is like finding the scattered shot from a cosmic shotgun blast. Even more telling are the nanodiamonds and the elevated levels of platinum found in this same layer. These materials are extraordinarily rare on Earth's surface but common in asteroids and comets. It is the chemical fingerprint of an extraterrestrial visitor, a calling card from the cosmos that settled across the globe. For a theory to hold such weight, it needs a ground zero, and one strong candidate lies hidden beneath the ice of Greenland. The Hiawatha crater, a vast depression over 30 kilometers wide buried under a kilometer of ice, bears all the geological signs of a recent and violent impact. While its exact age is still being confirmed, its existence powerfully suggests that a piece of that fragmented comet did indeed find its mark. The immediate aftermath is almost beyond comprehension. The impact on the massive North American ice sheet would have flash vaporized billions of tons of ice, sending torrents of meltwater pouring into the oceans. The heat would have ignited forests from coast to coast, creating a firestorm that choked the skies with soot and dust. This sudden, double blow to the atmosphere, first from the impact debris and then from the raging fires, is what likely triggered the planet's abrupt return to Ice Age conditions. It is a humbling thought that some of humanity's oldest stories, myths of a world consumed by flood and fire from the heavens, could be distant, fragmented memories of this very real event. This cosmic evidence challenges everything we thought we knew about the stability of our world and the timeline of our own history, forcing us to consider that our ancestors' greatest struggle may have been written in the stars. A great flood story is told by nearly every ancient culture on Earth. From the Epic of Gilgamesh in Mesopotamia to the biblical account of Noah, from the Deucalion myth in Greece to the tales of the Maya, the narrative is eerily consistent. A world is cleansed by water, a few are chosen to survive, and humanity is given a second chance. The sheer universality of this story raises a profound question. Could these myths be more than just religious allegory? Could they be the distant, fragmented memories of a real event seared into the collective consciousness of our species? Geologists point to a tangible cause for such a memory. At the end of the last ice age, the continent of North America held a vast inland sea known as Glacial Lake Agassiz. This body of freshwater, larger than all the modern Great Lakes combined, was held back by a dam of ice. When that ice dam finally gave way, it unleashed one of the most catastrophic floods the planet has ever witnessed. Trillions of gallons of fresh water poured into the Atlantic Ocean in a geological instant. This event, known as the Meltwater Pulse 1A, is believed to have raised global sea levels by several meters in just a few centuries, swallowing coastlines and low-lying plains where early human communities would have thrived. Now, read the flood myths again with this in mind. The common threads are impossible to ignore. There is always a divine or cosmic warning, a directive to build a vessel. A chosen few individuals, often a family, are selected to preserve life, and there is the overwhelming sense of a world being washed clean, a civilization lost to the waves. These are not the details of a local river flooding its banks. They are the hallmarks of a global, generation-defining cataclysm. What if these stories are the encoded history of the survivors? Imagine a community that lived for generations on a fertile coastal plain, only to watch the ocean slowly, inexorably, claim their home over the course of a single lifetime. Their entire world, the land of their ancestors, would have vanished beneath the waves. That traumatic experience, passed down through countless generations around campfires, would inevitably become legend, then myth. These ancient narratives give a human voice to the cold, hard data of geology. They bridge the gap between science and storytelling, suggesting that our oldest tales may be our most important historical records. Plato's dialogues tell of a powerful island kingdom that vanished long ago, a civilization called Atlantis that sank beneath the sea in a single day and night of misfortune. For centuries, this story was dismissed as pure philosophical fiction, a moral allegory about hubris. Yet when we place this ancient tale alongside the geological and climatic chaos of the younger Dryas, a startling possibility emerges. Could Atlantis be a distorted memory of a real culture that fell victim to that global catastrophe? Plato's account in Timaeus and Critias is surprisingly specific. He describes a vast circular city with alternating rings of land and water, connected by great bridges and tunnels. This was a society of advanced engineers and mighty sailors, located beyond the Pillars of Hercules, which we know today as the Strait of Gibraltar. Most importantly, he states this story was not his invention, but a true history passed down to the Greek lawgiver Solon by Egyptian priests, who spoke of a great ancient power that was destroyed by a natural cataclysm. The parallels are difficult to ignore. A sophisticated society, a location placing it in the Atlantic, and a sudden, violent end that matches the timeline of our global disaster. So where could such a place have been? Some researchers point to the Richat structure in Mauritania, a vast natural geological formation that, when viewed from above, looks astonishingly like a series of concentric circles. While not a sunken city, it is a place that could have inspired the description of Atlantis layout, a memory of a once great trading center that was abandoned as the climate shifted and the Sahara Desert formed. Another compelling candidate lies in the Mediterranean. The Minoan civilization on the island of Thera, modern Santorini, was a vibrant, advanced culture with sprawling palaces and complex plumbing. Around 3,600 years ago, a volcanic eruption of almost unimaginable force tore the island apart, triggering colossal tsunamis that would have ravaged the surrounding coasts, including Minoan Crete. This local disaster mirrors the Atlantis story on a smaller scale, a sophisticated island culture brought down by the sea. Could multiple such events, from the Thera eruption to the great coastal flooding at the end of the Ice Age, have merged over millennia into the single, powerful legend that Plato recorded? The search for a literal, circular city may be missing the point. These stories are like echoes in a canyon, growing distorted with each retelling, yet they all point back to a common source of immense trauma. The Atlantean enigma ultimately asks us to consider that our oldest myths are not merely stories. They are the legacy of those who survived, a warning whispered across 12,000 years that even the greatest of civilizations can be erased by the turning of the world. The stone pillars of Göbekli Tepe rise from the Turkish hills like silent, ancient giants. This sprawling complex of carved limestone is not merely old, it is profoundly anomalous. Built over 11,000 years ago, it predates Stonehenge by a staggering 6,000 years and the Great Pyramids by an even greater margin. According to everything we thought we knew about human history, this should not exist. The standard narrative tells us that hunter-gatherers were simple nomads, too preoccupied with daily survival to undertake projects of such staggering scale and sophistication. Yet here it is, a monumental temple complex constructed with immense T-shaped pillars weighing many tons, arranged in precise circles, and adorned with intricate carvings of animals and abstract symbols. Its very existence shatters the linear progression from simple hunter to settled farmer to civilized builder. So why was it built, and by whom, at the very dawn of the current geological age? The timeline offers a compelling clue. Göbekli Tepe was constructed in the immediate aftermath of the Younger Dryas, that period of catastrophic climate collapse. This coincidence is too powerful to ignore. Could this site be the work of survivors, a people who carried the memory and perhaps the advanced knowledge of a world that was lost? The sophistication of its engineering, with its perfectly fitted stonework and clear astronomical alignments, suggests these were not primitive beginners. They were masters of their craft, possessing a deep understanding of stone, geometry, and the sky above. One of the most tantalizing clues is found on Pillar 43, often called the Vulture stone. Its surface is a dense tapestry of carvings, not just of animals but of scorpions, a headless man, and a series of strange, bag-like symbols. Most intriguingly, a cluster of figures has been interpreted by researchers like Martin Sweatman as a celestial map. They argue that these symbols represent specific constellations, and that their arrangement describes a specific date in the distant past, a date that aligns remarkably with the proposed Younger Dryas impact event. If this interpretation is correct, it means the builders of Göbekli Tepe were not just remembering a disaster, they were encoding it in stone, creating a permanent record of the comet that shattered their world. This transforms the site from a simple temple into something far more profound. Was it a memorial to a fallen age, a stark warning to future generations about the fragility of civilization, or a bold declaration of a new beginning, a phoenix rising from the ashes of global catastrophe? After its pillars stood for over a millennium, Göbekli Tepe was not destroyed or abandoned in violence. It was deliberately and carefully buried, filled in with earth and stone around 8000 BC, as if its purpose had been served and its message sealed for the future. This act of preservation, rather than destruction, suggests its builders understood its significance would one day be rediscovered. Göbekli Tepe stands as an enduring enigma, a testament to the incredible resilience of humanity and the mysterious origins of our civilized world, forcing us to ask what other secrets from our forgotten past still lie waiting beneath the soil. The deliberate burial of Göbekli Tepe marks a profound turning point in the human story, one that forces us to reconsider the very origins of civilization. For generations, we have been taught that the invention of farming was humanity's great leap forward, a brilliant idea that allowed our ancestors to settle down and build towns. But what if this was not a story of ambition, but one of desperation? What if the agricultural revolution was not a choice, but a forced adaptation to a world shattered by catastrophe? The traditional narrative of the Neolithic Revolution paints a picture of gradual progress, where clever hunter-gatherers slowly realized they could plant seeds and raise animals. This perspective suggests a leisurely transition, a conscious improvement upon a nomadic lifestyle, yet the archaeological evidence tells a much more urgent story. The very first sites of plant domestication, in places like the Fertile Crescent, appear almost immediately after the Younger Dryas' cold snap finally released its grip on the planet. This is not a coincidence, it is a direct response to crisis. Before the climate reversal, the world was a place of plenty for nomadic peoples. Vast herds roamed lush grasslands, and wild grains grew in abundance. But the thousand-year winter changed everything. The great herds vanished, and the reliable stands of wild wheat and barley became scarce and unpredictable. The old way of life, based on following migratory animals and gathering seasonal plants, was no longer sustainable. Humanity was cornered. In this new, unstable world, the only path to survival was to control the food supply. Scattered groups of people who had once roamed freely began to hunker down in the few remaining fertile valleys. They started to selectively cultivate the hardiest strains of wild grasses, those that held onto their seeds and were easiest to harvest. This was the beginning of wheat and barley domestication. At the same time, they began to corral and manage the few animal species that could thrive alongside them, like goats and sheep, ensuring a steady source of meat, milk, and hides. This was not a leisurely experiment. It was a survival strategy born from the trauma of near extinction. The shift to agriculture came with a heavy cost. The skeletal remains from these early farming communities show clear signs of hardship compared to their hunter-gatherer predecessors. They suffered from nutritional deficiencies, repetitive stress injuries from constant labor, and the rapid spread of infectious diseases living in dense, settled villages. Their lives were often shorter and more difficult, so why would anyone choose this? The answer is simple. They did not have a choice. When the world you have always known collapses, you cling to any strategy that offers a chance of survival, even if it means a harder daily life. This forced innovation created a profound paradox. The very catastrophe that nearly wiped humanity out ultimately forged the foundations of modern society. The need to store grain led to the invention of pottery. The need to defend permanent settlements led to new social hierarchies and organized defense. The need to predict seasons for planting led to deeper astronomical study. From the ashes of a global disaster, humanity was forced to build something new, something more complex, and ultimately something more resilient. The fields of wheat that fed the first cities were not sown in a time of peace and prosperity. They were planted in desperation, a final, stubborn act of defiance against a world gone cold. The psychological impact of this global collapse is almost impossible to overstate. We can glimpse its shadow in our own post-apocalyptic stories, tales of a world stripped bare where survivors cling to fragments of the old ways. For the people living through the younger Dryas, this was not fiction. It was their crushing reality. They witnessed the very rhythms of nature, the predictable turn of the seasons, and the migration of herds they had relied upon for generations, suddenly and violently broken. The world they knew, a world their ancestors had understood for millennia, was erased before their eyes. This shared trauma left a deep scar on the human psyche, a cultural wound that would shape the myths and legends of every civilization to come. The archaeological record provides stark evidence of this cultural shattering. In North America, the sophisticated and widespread Clovis culture, known for its distinct and beautifully crafted spear points, vanishes completely from the stratigraphic layer. Below the black mat, their tools and campsites are abundant. Above it, they are simply gone. It is not a gradual evolution into a new style. It is a clean and total break, as if an entire chapter of human knowledge and tradition was ripped from the book. A similar pattern of disruption echoes across Europe and Asia, where advanced tool-making techniques used for centuries were abruptly abandoned, replaced by simpler, more utilitarian implements. This decline in technology is a telltale sign of societal collapse. When large, interconnected social networks fracture, the specialized knowledge held by artisans and elders is often the first thing to be lost. The intricate art, the complex rituals, and the advanced understanding of the natural world that once flourished within these networks could not be sustained by small, isolated bands of survivors fighting for their next meal. Imagine a master flintknapper whose skill in crafting a perfect Clovis point was a lifetime's achievement. In a thriving community, they could teach an apprentice, passing that knowledge down. But in a world of scattered, nomadic groups, that delicate chain of transmission is severed. The knowledge dies with the individual, lost forever. This societal reset forced humanity back to a foundational state. The grand, shared stories and technologies of the pre-catastrophe world fragmented into countless local traditions. From this desperate isolation, the diverse and distinct cultures we recognize today began their slow, separate journeys. The profound vulnerability this reveals is a sobering lesson for our own globally connected civilization. Our complex society, for all its strength, rests on fragile networks of communication and supply. The story of the younger Dryas asks us a difficult question. In the face of a true existential threat, how much of our own world would remain, and what would the survivors be forced to reinvent from the ashes? Our family tree holds a secret in its ancient rings, a sudden narrowing that points to a time when humanity itself was pushed to the brink. Geneticists, by studying the mitochondrial DNA passed from mother to child, can trace this lineage back through time, and they have uncovered a startling pattern. Roughly 12,000 years ago, the incredible diversity of the human gene pool suddenly constricted. The genetic evidence suggests our species went through a severe population bottleneck, a period where the number of effective breeding pairs may have plummeted to just a few thousand individuals. To put that in perspective, for a terrifying moment in our history, there were fewer humans on the entire planet than now live in a single small town. This is not a story of a local famine or a regional conflict. This is the biological signature of a global catastrophe, etched directly into our cells. The genetic variation we see across the world's billions today all stems from that tiny, resilient group of survivors. Who were these people, and what allowed them to endure when so many others did not? They were the scattered remnants of a once wider humanity, isolated in refuges, perhaps in fertile river valleys or along hospitable coastlines that were spared the worst of the climate chaos. Their survival was the ultimate genetic lottery, and their legacy is us. Every person alive today carries the ghostly imprint of that ancient near annihilation, a story of resilience written in the very code of our genes, a permanent reminder of how fragile our existence once was. The Great Pyramid of Giza stands as a silent monument to a mystery we have yet to solve. Its colossal blocks, weighing many tons, were quarried, transported, and assembled with a precision that challenges modern engineering. How did a society with copper tools achieve such a feat? This is not an isolated wonder. From the Americas to Southeast Asia, the recurring form of the pyramid speaks to a shared, deep-seated human impulse, or perhaps something more. The controversial possibility is that these structures are not the brilliant beginnings of civilization, but the fragmented echoes of its rebirth. They may represent the stubborn remnants of a sophisticated knowledge system that was nearly erased by global catastrophe. Consider the astronomical alignments embedded in these ancient sites. The Great Pyramid is oriented to true north with an accuracy of just a fraction of a degree, a task requiring a profound understanding of the Earth's rotation. The massive stones of Stonehenge are arranged to mark the solstices with stunning precision. These are not simple monuments to power, they are complex, working models of the cosmos. Could this advanced understanding of mathematics, geometry, and celestial mechanics have been developed from scratch by scattered, struggling survivors? Or were they applying the last fading fragments of a much older wisdom, a legacy from the world before the ice returned? The global distribution of pyramid structures is another powerful clue. While their styles differ, the fundamental concept, a massive, stable, ascending structure, appears in cultures separated by vast oceans, cultures that mainstream history tells us had no contact with one another. The pyramids of Egypt, the ziggurats of Mesopotamia, the step temples of Mesoamerica, and the massive mounds of North America all share this core architectural principle. This could be a case of parallel invention, a similar solution arrived at independently, but it could also point to a common ancestral source, a foundational knowledge of sacred geometry and earth energy that was carried by the diaspora of survivors as they migrated across the globe, adapting and rebuilding with whatever resources they found. This lost knowledge hypothesis forces a profound rethink of our intellectual timeline. We have long assumed a steady, upward climb from primitive to advanced. What if the path was not a straight line but a circle? What if human achievement peaked long before the dawn of recorded history, only to be shattered and forgotten? The survivors of the younger Dryas were left with a devastating task: to rebuild a world from the ashes. They possessed only shards of their former understanding, which over generations were ritualized, mythologized, and embedded into the very stones they raised toward the heavens. The true purpose of the Great Pyramid may not be as a tomb, but as a last desperate library, a permanent record of a lost world's knowledge, encoded in dimensions, angles, and alignments we are still struggling to decipher. Beneath the familiar blue surface of our oceans lies a lost continent of human memory. Marine archaeologists are now using advanced sonar to map these drowned landscapes, revealing vast territories that were once fertile plains, rolling hills, and river valleys teeming with life. One of the most dramatic of these lost worlds is Doggerland, a sprawling landmass that connected Great Britain to mainland Europe. For thousands of years, it was a rich ecosystem, home to Mesolithic hunter-gatherers who tracked herds of animals across its grassy expanses. Today, it lies under the North Sea, a silent realm where fishermen occasionally trawl up ancient mammoth bones and perfectly crafted flint tools from the seabed. These artifacts are poignant reminders of a world that was not lost to time but to rising water. The inundation of Doggerland was not a single, sudden event, but a relentless, generations-long encroachment. As the ice sheets melted at the end of the last ice age, the sea slowly reclaimed this land, pushing its human inhabitants ever backward until the final hills became islands and then vanished entirely. The story of this loss is preserved in the sediment cores pulled from the seafloor, each layer a page from a forgotten history book. This was not an isolated event. From the Persian Gulf to the coasts of Australia, vast coastal plains that once supported human communities now lie dozens of meters underwater. The process was likely accelerated by catastrophic meltwater pulses, sudden, massive releases of freshwater from collapsing ice dams that caused sea levels to rise rapidly. Imagine a community watching the ocean claim their ancestral hunting grounds over the course of a single lifetime, their entire world slowly sinking beneath the waves. This global flooding is recorded not just in geology, but in the flood myths of countless cultures, stories that speak of a world cleansed by water. The search for physical evidence of these lost coastal societies has led to fascinating and controversial discoveries. In India's Gulf of Combat, sonar images have revealed what appears to be geometrical structures and the outlines of a vast, submerged settlement. Similarly, off the coast of Japan, the Yonaguni Monument presents a stunning formation of massive, terraced stone blocks that some researchers argue are the ruins of an ancient, man-made complex. While the origins of these sites are hotly debated, their existence forces us to ask a profound question. How many thriving, sophisticated societies developed along the fertile coasts of the last ice age, only to have their entire legacy erased by the rising seas? The ocean floor is the world's largest and least explored museum, holding the secrets of a chapter in human history we are only just beginning to read. While the stars may have delivered one blow, the Earth itself held a far more intimate kind of fury. A different cataclysm could have unfolded not from the void above, but from the fiery heart of the planet below. This is the volcanic winter scenario, a vision of an apocalypse born from our own world's volatile geology. To understand its power, we can look to a much older event, the colossal eruption of Mount Toba on Sumatra roughly 74,000 years ago. That single supervolcanic event is believed to have pushed humanity to the brink of extinction, creating a global winter that may have lasted for a decade. The mechanism is terrifyingly simple. A volcano of that magnitude does not just spew lava, it vomits billions of tons of sulfur dioxide gas and fine ash high into the stratosphere. There, these particles form a reflective shield around the entire planet, a pale haze that turns the sun a dim red and drastically reduces the amount of life-giving sunlight that reaches the surface. Global temperatures plummet, This is the essence of a volcanic winter, and evidence suggests our planet may have endured a series of such eruptions right at the onset of the younger Dryas. The proof for this terrestrial tantrum is locked in the same icy archives that recorded the temperature drop. Scientists meticulously analyzing the Greenland ice cores have identified significant spikes in sulfate concentrations right at the 12,800-year mark. These sulfate layers are the chemical ghosts of ancient volcanic eruptions, a direct record of the moment vast quantities of sulfur aerosols were injected into the global atmosphere. Simultaneously, geological studies from across Europe and North America point to a period of intense and widespread volcanic activity in this same narrow window of time. It was not necessarily one single Toba-level event, but a perfect storm of multiple eruptions, their combined ejecta creating a sustained climatic shock that could have plunged the world back into ice. The consequences on the ground would have been indistinguishable from an impact winter. With sunlight sharply curtailed, photosynthesis would have faltered. Plants would have withered, and the entire food web, from the smallest herbivores to the largest predators, would have collapsed. For any human groups that had begun to rely on the early cultivation of plants, this would have been a disaster. Their first experimental crops would have failed completely, season after season. The very idea of farming would have seemed a futile gamble against a sky that had turned against them. This alternative explanation does not necessarily dismiss the cosmic impact hypothesis, but it introduces a compelling and terrifying duality. Could both forces have been at work, an impact triggering volcanic instability, or a period of intense volcanism simply mimicking the effects of an asteroid strike? Exploring this possibility forces a humbling realization. Our planet is not a passive stage for human history. It is an active, powerful, and occasionally violent participant. The true driver of the catastrophe may not have been a random visitor from space, but the awakening of the sleeping giant beneath our feet. This dark layer in the Earth is a boundary in time, a geological timestamp of the moment everything changed. Known to archaeologists as the black mat, this thin, carbon-rich stratum is found blanketing ancient landscapes from Arizona to the Carolinas, and even as far as Syria and South America. It is not a gradual accumulation of soil. It is a sudden, violent deposit that lies directly atop the last remnants of the Clovis culture and the bones of the great Ice Age mammals. Beneath it, you find their finely crafted spear points and the evidence of a thriving world. Above it, there is only silence. The black mat is the ultimate crime scene tape, cordoning off the world before from the world after. Its composition tells a stark story. It is packed with charcoal and soot, the unmistakable residue of continent-spanning wildfires, but mixed within this charred earth are even more telling clues. Scattered through the layer are microscopic magnetic spherules, tiny metallic beads formed when rock is vaporized by immense heat and then condenses as it falls through the air. Alongside them are nanodiamonds, a form of carbon created only under the extreme pressures of a cosmic impact. Finding these materials together, embedded in a single, global layer of ash, points to a single, terrible day of fire from the sky. The suddenness of this event is what makes it so chilling. This was not a slow change in climate that forced a gradual migration. This was an instantaneous ecological execution. The land was scorched, the atmosphere filled with a pall of smoke and dust, and the food web supporting both the giant creatures and the humans who hunted them was severed in an instant. What does it mean for a civilization when its entire foundation is literally buried under a layer of ash? The black mat is our most tangible connection to that day, a silent witness to the fragility of a world. The same environmental pressures that shattered continents also carved new pathways across the globe. these were not leisurely migrations, but desperate flights for survival, a great human dispersal directed by the shifting climate. As the immense ice sheets covering North America began their final retreat, they revealed a narrow passageway between two towering walls of ice. This is the legendary ice-free corridor, a temporary highway of habitable land that opened a route from the frozen north into the heart of a new world. For generations, we envisioned small bands of hunters cautiously exploring this passage, but the evidence now suggests a different story, one of rapid movement by people driven from their ancestral lands by the cold and chaos, racing toward an uncertain future. At the very same time, another doorway to the Americas was opening, this one along the Pacific coast. As the great glaciers melted, sea levels rose, but the rebound of the land itself created a navigable coastline rich with marine resources, a kelp highway that offered a different path for maritime explorers. These routes were not one-way streets opened by a gentle thaw. They were escape valves forced open by the immense pressure of a climate system in collapse. The entire map of human movement was being redrawn in real time. Across the Atlantic, a similar drama was unfolding. The relentless cold and the loss of the great mammoth steppe pushed populations south and west into Europe, while in Asia, groups were funneled across the now exposed land bridge of Beringia, a vast plain that connected Siberia to Alaska. For centuries, these groups had been separated by impassable ice. Now, the thawing world brought them into contact, leading to encounters that were likely filled with both wonder and tension. The genetic and cultural reshuffling that resulted from this global migration was unprecedented. Isolated gene pools suddenly mixed, and knowledge from one corner of the world could now travel to another. A tool-making technique developed in one valley might be adapted in another thousands of miles away. This was not a planned cultural exchange. It was a forced fusion, a consequence of populations being squeezed together into the few remaining hospitable zones. This great dispersal also sowed the seeds for the incredible cultural diversity we see today. As these scattered groups adapted to the unique challenges of their new homes, the deserts, the mountains, the rainforests, their languages, traditions, and worldviews began to diverge in spectacular ways. The catastrophe did not just force us to move, it forced us to innovate, to specialize, and to become the many-faceted species we are today. The peopling of the continents was the direct result of a world broken apart, a testament to humanity's relentless drive to find a new home, no matter how far the journey. A deep, primal fear echoes through our oldest stories. When the sky itself seems to turn against you, when the ground shakes and the seas rise without reason, the human mind seeks an explanation greater than itself. The trauma of that ancient catastrophe did not just reshape our landscapes, it fundamentally altered our perception of the universe and our place within it. This profound psychological shock may be the very bedrock upon which human spirituality and religion were built. Across the globe, the foundational myths of countless cultures share a common emotional core, a narrative of a world punished by powerful, unseen forces. We see sky gods like Zeus or Indra wielding thunderbolts, stories of great battles in the heavens that spill over onto the earth. We find tales of worlds being destroyed and remade, of a golden age lost to arrogance or sin. These are not random inventions, they are the cultural fingerprints of a shared generational trauma, an attempt to answer the unanswerable question of why their world was broken. In the face of such inexplicable power, the concept of random chance offers little comfort. It is far more psychologically manageable to believe the disaster was a form of divine punishment, an act of anger from a god or gods that could, in theory, be appeased. This shift in thinking marks a critical turning point. It gave the chaos a name and a reason. If the gods could be angered, then they could also be placated through ritual, sacrifice, and correct behavior. This may have spurred the very first organized shamanistic practices, where specific individuals were tasked with mediating between the community and these terrifying cosmic forces. Their role was to interpret the signs, to perform the ceremonies that might prevent such a cataclysm from happening again. This emerging world, you hardwired a sense of cosmic vulnerability into the human psyche. We were no longer just part of nature, we were at the mercy of powers far beyond our control. This is the birthplace of apocalypse, the idea that our world could end not with a whimper, but with a divine cleansing fire. The story of a great flood found from the Andes to the Middle East is the ultimate example. It is not merely a tale of rising water, it is a story of moral reckoning where a few are saved because they heeded a warning. This narrative provided a framework for understanding suffering and a blueprint for survival that was passed down for generations. It transformed a random geological event into a lesson, embedding a warning and a hope directly into our cultural DNA. The origins of our deepest spiritual beliefs, the very concepts of sin, salvation, and divine judgment, may not stem from a quiet philosophical awakening, but from the collective scream of a species that watched its world end. Our search for meaning in the stars began with the desperate need to find reason in the rubble. The artistry of a Clovis spear point is a marvel of ancient engineering. Crafted from fine-grained stone like chert or obsidian, these points are remarkably thin, symmetrical, and fluted, with a distinctive groove running up the center that allowed for a secure fit onto a wooden shaft. Creating such a tool was not a simple task of chipping away at a rock. It was a multi-stage process that required a deep understanding of material properties, precise striking angles, and a steady, practiced hand. The maker had to pre-shape the stone core, then deliver a perfectly calibrated blow to detach a long, thin flake, creating that signature flute. This was the work of a specialist, an artisan whose skills were honed over a lifetime and passed down through generations within a stable, interconnected society. These points are found across North America, a testament to the wide reach of the Clovis people and their sophisticated technological tradition. Then the layer of black mat falls, and the archaeological record changes dramatically. The elegant, complex Clovis points vanish. In their place, we find the tools of the Folsom culture. While still skillfully made, Folsom points are different. They are generally smaller, and the fluting, while present, often extends across nearly the entire face of the point. This is not necessarily an improvement, but a shift in priority. The focus seems to have moved from a versatile, master-crafted tool to one that was highly effective for a specific, critical task, hunting the dwindling herds of bison that remained. This shift from a generalized, sophisticated toolkit to a more specialized, utilitarian one is a classic signature of societal collapse. The intricate knowledge chain required to produce the classic Clovis point was broken. When communities are fractured and constantly on the move, fighting for daily survival, there is no time for a multi-year apprenticeship. The nuanced skills of selecting the perfect stone, of knowing exactly how to position the core for that master flake removal, these delicate techniques were among the first casualties of the catastrophe. This technological regression extended far beyond spear points. The Clovis people demonstrated evidence of long-distance trade, obtaining exotic stones from sources hundreds of miles away. This implies established routes, social alliances, and a level of economic security that allowed for the movement of non-essential goods. After the catastrophe, these networks appear to collapse. Tools are made from local materials, suggesting that groups became isolated, their world shrinking to the immediate landscape they could scavenge and defend. The loss was not just in objects, but in the very knowledge of how to live in a complex world. Strategies for managing large game, techniques for storing food for lean seasons, and perhaps even the earliest concepts of structuring a community around something more than mere subsistence may have evaporated in the struggle to survive. How many other advancements, from medicinal plant use to early forms of astronomy, were set back for thousands of years? The story of human technology is not a straight line ascending ever upward. It is a path with deep valleys, reminding us that progress is not a permanent possession, but a fragile achievement that must be carefully guarded and passed on. The evidence for our ancient disaster is compelling, but it points toward an even more unsettling possibility. What if the event that nearly ended humanity was not a singular, freak accident in Earth's history, but part of a regular, repeating cycle? This is the core of the cosmic cycle theory, a concept that reframes our planet's story not as one of gradual change, but of punctuated equilibrium shattered by periodic, violent resets. We find clues to this pattern in the deepest layers of the geological record, which tell of at least 5 major mass extinction events long before humans walked the Earth. The most famous, the Cretaceous-Paleogene event that ended the age of the dinosaurs 66 million years ago, was almost certainly caused by a massive asteroid impact. The evidence is clear and overwhelming: a layer of iridium-rich clay found across the globe, a chemical marker that points directly to a cosmic culprit. This pattern of destruction and renewal seems to be woven into the very fabric of life on our planet. To explain this apparent regularity, scientists have proposed several startling mechanisms. One compelling idea is the Shiva hypothesis, named for the Hindu deity of destruction and rebirth. This theory suggests that the gravitational pull of a hypothetical dwarf star companion to our Sun, often called Nemesis, could periodically disrupt the icy bodies in the distant Oort cloud. Every 26 million years or so, this gravitational nudge would send a shower of comets hurtling into the inner solar system, a celestial storm that would inevitably bombard Earth. Another theory points to our solar system's rhythmic journey through the crowded plane of the Milky Way galaxy. As we oscillate above and below this plane, we might pass through regions of space with a higher density of interstellar gas and dust, which could similarly destabilize comets in our own cosmic backyard. The statistical likelihood of a major impact is not a question of if, but when. Astronomers estimate that an asteroid large enough to cause global devastation, over 1 kilometer in diameter, strikes Earth on average every few 100,000 years. An event on the scale of the younger Dryas impact, capable of collapsing civilizations, might occur every few dozen millennia. When you place the pieces of this puzzle together, a profound picture emerges. The catastrophe that reshaped ancient humanity was likely not a unique anomaly. It was the most recent installment in a predictable, recurring pattern of cosmic bombardment and environmental collapse. This cyclical perspective forces a complete re-evaluation of human progress and security. Our entire recorded history, all our empires and technological leaps, have occurred in the brief, quiet window since the last reset. We have built our modern world on a foundation of geological calm that is, in the grand scale of cosmic time, merely the quiet between storms. Are we living on borrowed time, enjoying a temporary reprieve before the next global upheaval? This is not a call for fear, but for a profound shift in perspective. It challenges us to look beyond the short-term concerns of our daily lives and consider the long-term resilience of our species. If we accept that such events are part of our planet's natural rhythm, then our greatest project must be to ensure that the next time the cycle turns, the flame of human knowledge is not so easily extinguished. The entrance to the cave would have been a curtain to a different world. After days or weeks of sheltering from the sky-borne fire and the choking dust, the first scout to step outside would have faced a vision of utter desolation. The air itself would have carried a new scent, one of damp ash and charred earth. The great familiar herds were gone, their absence leaving a silence deeper than any these people had ever known. The very rhythm of life, the seasonal migrations, the calls of the great beasts had been severed. Archaeological sites from this period, like the Galt site in Texas, show this stark transition in the layers of soil. Below, there is evidence of a rich Clovis campsite with abundant tools and the bones of mammoths. Above, in the immediate aftermath, the settlements shrink and the artifacts become simpler, telling a story of people stripped of their former way of life, clinging to the few resources left. Their daily existence became a brutal calculation of calories. Every movement was a risk, every foray for food a potential encounter with new dangers. With the giant herbivores gone, the balance of power had shifted. Scavengers and smaller predators, now desperate themselves, would have seen these weakened humans as potential prey. A twisted ankle, a sudden illness, or a missed spear throw could mean the end not just for an individual, but for the entire knowledge they carried. In this new world, the elders who remembered which root was safe to eat, which berry could cure a fever, or how to track the last of the woodland bison became the most vital members of the group. Their memories were the library of a lost world, and every death was another book burned. How did these few thousand souls scattered across the continents manage to not only endure but eventually plant the seeds for our future? Their resilience was forged in the most fundamental of human bonds, cooperation. Small, isolated bands would have been forced to seek out others, to share scarce resources, and to pool their collective knowledge. A new tool design discovered by one group could spread, becoming a lifeline for another. They learned to read the subtle signs of the recovering landscape, finding edible cattails in the marshes and tracking the movements of the smaller game that now populated the forests. The psychological burden must have been immense, a crushing weight of loss and responsibility. They were the last of their kind, the custodians of a flame that had nearly been extinguished. Every child born was a defiance of the darkness, a bet placed on a future they could not yet see. The story of these survivors is not one of heroic conquest, but of quiet, desperate perseverance. It is the story of our species at its most vulnerable, and in that vulnerability, finding the stubborn will to begin the world again. The words we speak today carry the echoes of an ancient schism. If our genetic code bears the scars of a population bottleneck, then the incredible diversity of human languages might be its cultural counterpart. Before the world fractured, it is conceivable that humanity's linguistic landscape was far less complex. Some researchers propose the existence of far-reaching proto-languages, ancestral tongues that connected vast networks of people across continents. The catastrophe did not just scatter our ancestors physically, it shattered their primary tool for connection. As small, isolated bands retreated into separate refuges, deep river valleys, secluded coastlines, protected highlands, they were cut off from the constant linguistic exchange that keeps a language unified. A group surviving in the mountains of the Caucasus would have no contact with another clinging to life in the jungles of Southeast Asia. Over the course of just a few centuries, which is a blink in linguistic time, their speech would have begun to drift. New words were invented for new survival challenges, old words for lost creatures or landscapes were forgotten, and accents hardened into mutually unintelligible dialects. This rapid, parallel evolution of language in isolated pockets could explain one of anthropology's greatest puzzles: the sheer number of completely distinct language families with no apparent common root. Why do the grammatical structures of Basque, spoken in the Pyrenees, share so little with its neighbors? Why are the native languages of the Americas so profoundly unique? These may not be signs of separate origins, but of profound and ancient separations. The isolation forced by the global collapse acted as a linguistic accelerator, taking the fragments of a common human heritage and spinning them into thousands of unique threads. Our languages are more than just tools for communication. They are living artifacts of a great dispersal, each one a unique solution to the problem of rebuilding a world and describing it from scratch. A massive stone slab stands balanced on two upright rocks in a field in rural France. This simple structure, a dolmen, is a tomb. An identical design appears in the Korean countryside and again in the deserts of Saudi Arabia. Separated by tens of thousands of miles and built by cultures with no known contact, these structures are eerily the same. This is the megalithic mystery, a global architectural echo that defies simple explanation. From the great stone circles of Britain to the immense pyramids of Giza and the step temples of Peru, our planet is dotted with monuments built from colossal stones, all aligned with an uncanny precision to the movements of the sun, moon, and stars. The Great Pyramid faces true north. The massive stones of Stonehenge frame the summer solstice sunrise. The Sun Temple at Machu Picchu captures the winter solstice light through a perfectly positioned window. These are not coincidences. This is a pattern, a shared language written in stone across the entire globe. How could cultures separated by oceans and continents, who never met, independently arrive at the same complex architectural and astronomical solutions? The conventional answer is parallel development, the idea that different people simply had the same great idea at different times. But the consistency is too perfect, the astronomical knowledge too sophisticated for societies we are told were just beginning to farm. There is another, more profound possibility. What if these structures are not the brilliant beginnings of civilization, but the stubborn remnants of its rebirth? The survivors of the global catastrophe were scattered to the winds, carrying with them fragmented memories of a lost world. They remembered a time when the skies were predictable, when the seasons turned in a reliable rhythm, and when their ancestors possessed a deep understanding of the cosmos. In the aftermath of chaos, their most urgent task was not merely to survive, but to re-establish order, and order for them was written in the stars. Building these colossal monuments may have been an act of cosmic realignment. By raising stones that captured the solstice sun or marked the lunar standstill, they were rebuilding a broken cosmological clock. They were using the only permanent material they had, stone, to create a fixed, unchanging reference point in a world that had proven terrifyingly unstable. The shared blueprint was not a set of architectural plans carried from a sunken continent. It was a shared memory of a universal order, a foundational knowledge of sacred geometry and celestial mechanics that was the common inheritance of humanity before the Great Dispersal. The specific styles differ: a pyramid in Egypt, a stone circle in Britain, a dolmen in India, because each surviving group adapted this core knowledge using the local materials and cultural expressions available to them. But the underlying purpose remained the same: to anchor their new world to the eternal rhythms of the universe, ensuring that the celestial harmony, once shattered, would never be lost again. These silent stone sentinels are perhaps the most enduring legacy of that ancient catastrophe, not as ruins of a forgotten past, but as active participants in humanity's greatest project, the desperate and hopeful rebuilding of a world. Out of thousands of large mammal species that have walked the earth, why have humans only ever successfully domesticated a mere handful? This question points to a profound paradox. The familiar animals of our farms and homes, from cows and sheep to dogs and goats, represent a tiny fraction of the planet's potential. The window for their taming was not just a matter of human ingenuity, it was a unique set of circumstances forged in the aftermath of global collapse. The mass extinction that wiped out the mammoths and giant sloths also removed countless other species that might have been candidates for domestication. This created an ecological vacuum, leaving only a small pool of large mammals from which to choose. But necessity is the mother of invention, and the new, harsh reality of a post-catastrophe world provided that necessity in abundance. As human groups settled into fixed agricultural communities, their survival depended on a reliable source of protein, labor, and materials like wool and leather. The scattered, nomadic lifestyle was no longer an option, so they turned their attention to the wild creatures that remained. Yet not every animal is suited to life alongside humans. The species that were successfully domesticated all shared a specific set of behavioral traits. They lived in herds with a clear social hierarchy, which meant they could accept a human as their leader. They were not overly aggressive or prone to panic in confined spaces, and they bred readily in captivity. It is a fascinating possibility that the trauma of the global catastrophe itself may have selected for these very traits. The creatures that survived the climate chaos and hunting pressures were likely the most adaptable, the most resilient, and the most tolerant of stress. The wild aurochs, the ancestor of all modern cattle, was a formidable beast, but the individuals with slightly calmer dispositions were the ones both more likely to survive in a changing world and more likely to be tolerated and then managed by humans. This slow process of selective breeding was not a planned scientific experiment. It was a partnership born from mutual need in a world rebuilding from the ground up. Our ancient bond with these animals, a cornerstone of civilization itself, may be another unspoken legacy of that distant day when the sky fell. Deep within the caves of Lascaux, a torch flickers against a wall, revealing a herd of horses caught in a moment of eternal motion. These are not simple sketches, they are masterpieces of observation and spirit, painted in stunning ochre and charcoal nearly 18,000 years ago. Around the same time, in the cavern of Chauvet, artists captured the power of lions and the mass of woolly rhinos with a sophistication that still takes our breath away. This creative explosion did not emerge from a long, peaceful development. It burst onto the scene in the shadow of the great climatic collapse. Across Europe and beyond, the archaeological record reveals a sudden, profound shift. For the first time, we find evidence of personal adornment, beads made from shell and ivory, and small, portable sculptures. This is the birth of the symbolic mind, a new way for humanity to see its place in the world. After facing an event that defied all understanding, how did our ancestors begin to make sense of the pieces? The act of creation may have been their answer. To paint an animal was not merely to record its shape. It was to grasp its essence, to assert a form of control over a natural world that had proven terrifyingly unpredictable. In the flickering torchlight, these artists were not just decorating a wall. They were rebuilding a relationship with the living world, one graceful line at a time. A stunning example of this new cognitive leap was found in a German cave, a small ivory statue known as the Lion Man. This figure, with the body of a man and the head of a lion, is not a depiction of something from the real world. It is a creature of pure imagination, a fusion of human and animal spirits into a single, powerful being. Its very existence proves that the human mind was now capable of abstract thought, of conceiving concepts and beings that lived only in the realm of ideas. This was a fundamental breakthrough. It allowed for the creation of shared myths, for rituals that bound communities together. and for the first inklings of a spiritual world beyond the immediate struggle for survival. Did the trauma of near extinction force this new layer of consciousness to the surface? When your entire reality is shattered, perhaps the only way to cope is to invent a new one, to find meaning not just in what is, but in what could be. The beads and pendants that appear from this era tell a similar story. An individual wearing a necklace of carved ivory was doing more than adorning themselves. They were making a statement about identity, about belonging to a group, or about a personal connection to a protective spirit. In a world where social networks had been fractured, these symbols helped forge new bonds, creating a visual language of community that everyone could understand. The birth of complex art and symbolic thought is the beautiful silver lining of that global disaster. From the depths of despair and loss, humanity discovered a new way to hope, to connect, and to ultimately redefine what it means to be human. The images they left behind are more than prehistoric art. They are the first pages of our collective story, written in ochre and memory on the walls of a dark and silent world. Our modern world, with all its nations and technologies, was born from the ashes of that ancient crisis. The scattered survivors of the catastrophe did not just restart, they laid the foundation for everything that followed. The first permanent settlements arose directly from that desperate need to control a broken food supply, huddling together for mutual protection and shared labor. These small villages eventually grew into the world's first true cities, like Jericho and Çatalhöyük, where the constant pressure of living in close quarters spurred a cascade of new inventions. The need to record grain stores and trade agreements led to the birth of writing, first as simple tally marks on clay tablets. The need to organize large community projects for defense and irrigation forged the earliest forms of government and social hierarchy. Every foundational pillar of civilization, from structured religion to codified law, can be traced back to the solutions our ancestors devised to prevent such a collapse from ever happening again. The relentless pressures of that era selected for specific human traits. Resilience became paramount, the ability to endure loss and start over. Cooperation was no longer just beneficial, it was essential for survival, favoring groups that could work together over solitary individuals. Innovation was forged in the fire of necessity, as every new tool or technique could mean the difference between life and death for an entire community. This global reset channeled human development down a very specific path, one defined by agriculture, urbanization, and the accumulation of knowledge. Without that cataclysmic intervention, humanity might have continued as nomadic hunter-gatherers for millennia longer, developing along a trajectory we cannot even envision. Our languages, our faiths, and our very identities are the legacy of those who endured. In a very real sense, we are the children of that global disaster, living in a world shaped by its long and echoing shadow. Our journey through the evidence is now complete. We have walked across the geological crime scene of the Black Mat, felt the sudden chill of the ice cores, and traced the narrowing path of our own genetic heritage. From the cosmic fire in the sky to the silent burial of Göbekli Tepe, a single, powerful story emerges, a narrative not of slow progress, but of sudden collapse and a desperate, brilliant rebirth. The echoes of this event are not distant whispers. They resonate in the structure of our farms, the foundations of our cities, and the very languages we speak. Our world was forged in the crucible of catastrophe. The philosopher George Santayana offered a timeless warning that those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. This exploration is more than a look into ancient history. It is a mirror reflecting the profound fragility of our own civilization and the incredible resilience required to preserve it. The forces that shaped our past are still present in the cycles of our climate and the vastness of space. Understanding this story is our first step toward building a future that can endure. I would love to hear your perspective on this profound mystery. Please share your thoughts in the comments. And if you want to continue these journeys into the deepest secrets of our past, subscribe for more.